So I'll give you sort of like some just big picture item stuff from, and by the way, I think some of these slides are all available on Room Now. But, you know, this sort of is how it started in April 2016 in the United States with Celltrion and their CTP13 antibody that has now been licensed as Inflectra and Remsima and probably some other names. This made it into the market in the United States. I think this was the second biologic biosimilar in the United States. And I think right now, as of 2019, we have 25 biosimilars in the United States, 13 of whom are marketed, meaning there's 12 that are not, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But of the 25 that are out there, there are 11 of them are TNF inhibitors, and 2 are rituximab. So rheumatology is getting its more than fair share of the action here. And you can see that the thing is that these drugs, these biosimilars of infliximab, etanercept, adalimumab, and again infliximab, were studied in 1 or 2 conditions, but because they met the regulatory definition of a biosimilar, they were then given the extrapolated indications and have the same package insert as does the reference product, unless there's other data in their application that would warrant a different, you know, news or inclusion of other data, like, so you're going to have, for instance, the same black box warning, or box warning, I should say. You're going to have the same section 5.3 with the reference product is going to be same section 5.3 in the package insert with the biosimilar. So that's really important to understand, I think, maybe where this has gone. This is where we are today. This is 11 biosimilars that are approved in the United States. I think there's 4 infliximabs, there's 5 adalimumabs, and there's 2 etanercepts, would be my just quick guess. You can see 16, 17 is a good year. 18 was a lull, a lot of action in the second half of 2019, right? And there's more to come, you know, and the question is, how is this going to affect you? And what are you going to see here? This shows you that, again, infliximab, there's 4 and there's 5 adalimumabs. And again, you just do one trial in one disease, whether it be RA or AS, but you get the whole, you know, package as far as, you don't have to do the other studies. This greatly bothered the physicians in Canada and the physicians and the gastroenterologists. They were really miffed that all this dermatology studies, like for, you know, for, I think it was one of the adalimumab studies was done with just in dermatology, and another one was done just in psoriatic arthritis. And they're going to apply that to their patients with ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. They said, no way, Charlie. And they came up with some cockamamie, uncontrolled 13-patient study out of Ireland showing that it didn't work in IBD patients. It didn't work because they didn't want it to work, and they told the patients, I'm giving it to you because I'm forced to give it to you, although I don't want to give it to you. So yes, they had more complaints and more failures and whatnot. This is the market. This is what biosimilars have done to what I do in rheumatology. I have 30 FDA-approved biologics, and I'm not even counting the small molecule inhibitors or the JAK inhibitors or targeted synthetics, whatever you want to call them. But this is the number of choices that I have, at least as far as biologics, and that does include the 13 total biosimilar products, including 2 rituximab products. Now, should you be confused, everybody knows that infliximab, etanercept, adalimumab, golimumab, blah, 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 right? What is INF DYBB? DYYB. What is INF abadabadu? What is INF? These are the FDA naming principles that are mandated by the FDA for a new drug. The rest of the world is not doing these suffixes on the end of, so now when I talk about infliximab, I could talk about, and there's, by the way, Remicade has a 4-letter suffix. I don't have it in here, but all of these actually have their own 4-letter suffix now. And you can imagine when you're doing, I was thinking about this today, that I should, since this is a CME conference, I should pay particular attention to using the generic names. Imagine if I'm going to do a talk, and let's just say adalimumab here is called XYZ because it's the Humira construct. And now I'm going to have a discussion about adalimumab XYZ versus adalimumab BWWD versus adalimumab adazorazataz or what, you know, everyone's going to like stand up and leave. Why not just call them what they are, which is their marketed names? I don't understand why that's a big problem, and maybe I just broke a major CME rule. One of these is Ruxience, the other one's called Truxima for Rituxan. So again, that's where we stand. When we started out, this was going to be a big thing. Early on, they projected, this whole thing started around 2006 when the first biosimilar was approved in the EU. It was first approved in the United States in 2015, the Neupogen biosimilar called Zarxio. But in this era, we were thinking, you know, $150 billion in sales. And again, just in the United States, it's estimated it's going to maybe get as high as $69 billion by 2025. They chose 2025 because at 2023, all the rules change. The protection for Enbrel and Humira goes away in the United States. Right now, they are protected until 2023. Maybe Enbrel goes longer than that. And worldwide, it's estimated that could at some point be as much as 50% of the market, but they're estimating in our lifetime or coming up soon, high 20s to 30% of the market. And as I mentioned earlier, 2019, the FDA approved 10 biosimilars. That gives them a total of 26, I guess 26 or 25. We have 13 marketed in the United States. That means there's some that, like Erelzi, the etanercept biosimilar from Sandoz, is not marketed in the United States because of a patent protection and because of legal proceedings over patent law. But the issue is that, you know, the introduction of the JAK inhibitors has certainly cut into the sales, versus worldwide sales of infliximab. This is infliximab Remicade. And so we're talking about billions of dollars. These are multi-billion-dollar drugs. You know, Humira is a $20 billion drug this year, right? Infliximab looks like it's going to be if this is right, thousands. This would be an $11 billion drug. I think it was a $1 billion drug. Thousands, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's a $1 billion, almost $2 billion drug. At one point, you know, it was like 3, 4, 5 for Enbrel, Remicade, and Humira as far as annual worldwide sales. It's 3, 4, 5 billion apiece. And then I think Enbrel's peaked at around 10, 11 billion. Humira's been 20 billion, almost 19 last few years. But Remicade has been declining steadily. Now, is that the new JAK inhibitors? Or is that the biosimilars that are coming into play? I think the biosimilars are really making a major impact on that. So these are definitions. This is the EU, came up with the first definition. Biosimilarity means that a biologic product is highly similar to a reference product, notwithstanding minor differences in clinically inactive components, and that there are no clinically meaningful differences between the biologic product and the reference product in terms of safety, purity, and potency of the product, right? That's the analytic part of development. So again, small molecules, you know, that's why you get generics of, they call them generics for nonsteroidals, for leflunomide, for tofacitinib when it goes generic. These will be small molecules and they will be in the generic market. But biopharmaceutical, when it goes into almost the same process, it becomes a biosimilar. And I think that there's a lot to be learned about the acceptance and growth of biosimilars from what happened in generics, where there was tremendous resistance to generics in the first 10 years, and now they're commonplace worldwide. But still people believe that they again, may not be as good as the actual product. And with generics, often the biggest maker of a generic, let's just say the generics is fluorbiprofen, which was called NSAID in the United States. When that went generic, the biggest maker of fluorbiprofen was the one that was making NSAID, Upjohn. They became the biggest manufacturer. There are other companies can get into the mix too. So again, generics are often, I think, highly valuable because you get a discounted price on them that, well, it used to be very discounted. Now even generics are getting crazy. Again, highly similar is the whole thing here. Generally highly identical. I mean, you don't usually get identical because a lot of it has to do with not just the primary structure, but secondary structure. CTP13 is the first one from Celltrion, marketed as Remsima or Inflectra in the EU or worldwide versus in the United States. When it went in front of the FDA hearing, it didn't have a unanimous vote. It was 21-3, but that was, felt to be pretty good. It was based on the Planetas, this is the Planet AS studies in 250 AS patients, and the Planetra in RA with 606 patients. Now think about it. What does it take to get a drug approved for a new biologic? Roughly about 2,000, 4,000 patients. Clinical trials run a minimum of $2 billion when you're doing a phase 2 or phase 3. And it used to be drug development was $2 billion in 10 years. Now it's about 10 to 15 years, and it's probably closer to 4 to 5 billion to develop a drug, right? And the phase 2 process where you have a few hundred and then very large phase 3s to get you to those 2,000 or more that you need. Now you can get approved with as little as 200 patients and just do one trial. In the United States, they have this other rule, which is if you want to get FDA approval for your version of aspirin, was made like, back when they were, using rocks for wheels and stuff like that, that if you go through the process of doing some purity studies showing how you manufacture the drug, doing a 60, 150, 200 patient 6-week study, you can now get a patent protection on a drug that is available for pennies, and now you can charge $10 for that same drug. That's what happened with colchicine in the United States. I can tell you, when that happened in the United States, that would have been roughly about 10 years ago. I don't prescribe colchicine to nobody. And when I do, I truly have written in the last 10 years 2 prescriptions for colchicine. I don't need it. I don't need it for nothing. Now, I don't manage a lot of FMF and autoinflammatory disease that might respond to that, or Behçet's. I don't think it really works in Behçet's in my experience. But a few people need it. I send them to Canada where they can get it cheap, right? But I don't need it because it's still, even now that it's back to being generic, it's no longer $5 a pill. It's now like $3 a pill. It's crazy. I don't need colchicine. Now, can you say the same for biosimilars? I don't know. I think we are going to always need it. Now, there are other countries that are making, the big makers are out of Japan and out of Korea. Samsung is a big maker. Celltrion's a very big maker. Merck has gotten very big into it. Who hasn't gotten into this is AbbVie. AbbVie is doubling down on Humira. Why not? Best-selling drug worldwide. And putting all their efforts into their JAK inhibitor upadacitinib. And that's their future. Other companies are diversifying, like Amgen has Amgevita, their version of adalimumab. And there are other companies that are like Rabaxi and Reliance and these people that are all making biosimilars mainly out of India and some out of Pakistan. And in those countries, you have a lot of biomimics. They don't meet the definition of a biosimilar. The manufacturing process is kind of shoddy. I'm not saying they don't work. I'm saying you get what you pay for, and they're much cheaper, but you don't really know what you're getting. So I know that people who have looked into this strongly recommend against using, you know, casdozokitug or whatever it was that was a biomimic. This is another one out of South Korea. But I wanted, you know, I didn't want to show a lot of biosimilar data, but they all look like this. You know, there are all trial design where you have to be within the goalposts as far as your efficacy parameters and as far as your immunogenicity parameters. But you know what they are? They're like overlapping. You know, but a goalpost means it's plus or minus 5 points or 10% or something like that. Every biosimilar study I've ever seen all look like this, overlapping lines as far as ACR 20, 50, and 70 responses. And the same can be said for their immunogenicity studies. So there's a lot of action going on. Adalimumab biosimilars, etanercept biosimilars, Samsung is a big player. Infliximab, again, Samsung, Pfizer's in there. You know, there are biosimilars that are out there now for abatacept. Anakinra just went off patent. I don't know if Sobi's going to get competition with anakinra. Will there be someone who makes an anakinra biosimilar? I wouldn't be surprised. So they usually are going to be pretty close on their primary structure. They're usually not very close when it comes to their secondary or their tertiary, where they get a lot of folding and whatnot, and then quaternary structure. The biosimilar and the reference product over here are fast and loose. But again, remember the regulatory guidance language said they should be essentially the same, but still have high purity, right? And that's the main. There are going to be differences, and as there are differences in batch-to-batch makes of Remicade made by the same company, but made by the same company on different continents. They're really not the same drug. So again, there's a lot that goes on here, the protein folding, misfolding, aggregation, enzymatic cleavage, and even more that goes into why a biosimilar may be different than the originator biologic. Don't care about that. It's worldwide now. I think there are biosimilars in every country. I was talking at lunch with a number of you about what's being used here in Dubai. And it's interesting to note how that goes. The question is whether you're in control or whether the government's in control. I think if you work for a government clinic, the physician is in control. I can tell you, I'm not in control in the United States. I'm not. I know way more about biologics and biosimilar than anybody within I'll just say 10-mile radius of where I work. And the hospital where I work, they called me and said, we're thinking about getting the Inflectra. And they asked me my opinion. And I said, great, it's great, but don't do it until you can negotiate a serious discount. Because the discount they were giving was 10, 15%. And why bother? Because as soon as you take it, Johnson, or Senecor, or whoever they're going to come back and they're going to match the price, and why even mess with the new product? Because it's going to just flip people out, either the doctors or the patients or whoever. But they did that, and they never told me, and they never told patients, and patients usually find out in year 2 they've been taking a fake version of Remicade, and they're very, very upset. And now I have to defend it about why it was a good idea. And it's not that I'm defending it because I think that they're being mistreated. I will defend that. They're not being mistreated. I'm against it because the stupid idiots at my hospital didn't negotiate a better price. Because this is now a competitive market. And someone's going to make a lot of money. I know it ain't going to be you. It's definitely not going to be patients. It's either going to be the insurers or the hospitals. Now, if you're an infusion center and you do a lot of infusions, it could benefit you. But you have to do a lot of infusions to really get the benefit. So the whole deal about development here is when you're developing, you know, a usual biologic, it's called, in the United States, called the 351A program or pathway. You have to do some prerequisite analytics and then preclinical in animals, but you do the early phase 1 and then phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 up here, where you spend a lot of time and money. This is from here to here, again, 12 years and $4 billion, right? But it's totally flipped with biosimilars, where you spend all your time with analytics and structure and immunogenicity and animals, and very little in actual trials. Trials, you just got to do one trial, and then you get all the indications. It's very interesting. I'm not going to do that. This shows you what happened in the Planetus, the AS study, and in the Planetra, the RA study, and those are overlapping results. They also looked at immunogenicity in these studies, and one of them had a low level, I think this one had a low level of immunogenicity, like, you know, I don't know, maybe like 10% of them developed anti-chimeric antibodies. Over here, I think they developed like 50% or more, like some crazy, crazy number. Well, that has a lot to do with the assay they used. It didn't have any bearing on actual loss of efficacy in these patients. As long as the immunogenicity numbers were the same between the originator and the biosimilar, you're good. And that's how it worked. So that's that data there. This is this is some of it here. This is the AS study, I think. Yeah, AS study Planetus. Very low numbers here. All right, it's equal at 30 weeks. But over here, the numbers, it's 25 to 50%, but there's no difference between the biosimilar and the originator or reference product. Extrapolation, there are different rules, but they're all about the same. What's really an issue now is the issue of whether you're going to be involved in the switchover, okay? Or whether it's going to be controlled by your government. And that's kind of a big issue right now in the United States. Again, this made the GI people crazy that, well, you know, a study done in RA was now being extended, you know, to ulcerative colitis down here. So I'll just say that in the United States, the problems are very slow uptake. Very, very slow uptake. We posted an article, there's been a few articles on Room Now about, you know, the shame of, well, actually it was like, kind of got a little trouble for writing it. It was called The Shame of Humira, Shame of Adalimumab Drug Development, meaning that we've got 5 adalimumab biosimilars, there's only one available in the United States. The company that's making $20 billion a year is spending like $18 billion in litigation to prevent, I made that number up by the way, that's not true. They're spending a lot of their profits on litigation so that they pay off their competitors or whatever, however it's happening, but no one is no longer suing. I can tell you with biosimilars hitting the market, the courts were overloaded with patent law litigation, especially against Sandoz, Amgen and Sandoz over etanercept, and all the makers of the adalimumab and AbbVie. And they've all pretty much been settled at this point, and it's shameful. Now, where it's not been settled is with Remsima, Inflectra, and the other 4 infliximab biosimilars that are available. 3 are available in the United States, and they're not doing badly. They made, I think, 600, 700, 800 million in 2018 in sales. That's pretty good, right? But we saw what's happening with infliximab sales, Remicade sales at the same time. So again, I think it could help society and could help patients. But the problem is that, you know, their introduction and how they're being used, you can see that the spending on what's the spending? Commercialized. This is commercialized spending that adalimumab is spending the most, but it's not going to be really introduced in the United States till 2023. Worldwide, adalimumab is being, not just by AbbVie, but all the other companies that are making the adalimumab biosimilars have taken off and are selling it and doing well in these countries. This is basically where you can see where, if you know your flag and it's not on there, I'm sorry, it just wasn't high enough to make this particular cut. But you can see that they have, you know, Avastin and Herceptin. These are very popular biosimilars, and insulin is another big biosimilar area right now in the United States. This is what's going on in the United States as well, which is this issue of switching. So one of these is the Dan Bio database, where they started out with going from infliximab to CTP13 in 2015, and then in 2017 they switched from CTP13 to SB2. That's the Samsung infliximab. And then there are other studies showing 3-time switches. By the way, that's basically the results there. Efficacy is the same. Immunogenicity is the same. But if you look at the studies that look at physician and patient impressions, there's always, you know, the impression of the originator is here, the impression of the biosimilar is here. It's either up here like this or like here like this. Meaning everybody's afraid of what they don't know, and then the adoption and the uptake of these biosimilars by us, by other specialties, has been slow. I think it's partly because people have no experience with them. People may not like the rules and that flipped, you know, pathway where you do little clinical trials is uncomfortable to a lot of physicians. But when you start looking at the real data, you know, even the molecular data, and then the ACR 20 data and the switch data, it's really, you know, it's hard to argue with these drugs as being not useful in our care. Who has used biosimilars in the audience? Who's never used them? Wow. Hold out, you know. You're gonna, at some point, you're gonna be that last standing dinosaur, but go power to you. You know, I think here's what the deal is. I am firmly in favor of biosimilars because I do believe with the overall goal of them that you're going to save money. I mean, I think it's ridiculous in the United States that to get adalimumab, it's going to cost $66,000 a year. $66,000 a year. I think that's unreasonable. Now, that's been going on for a long time. And by the way, you know, not many other drugs are cheaper, right? And then you look at the, you know, Inflectra and Remsima want to come in the United States at a 15% discount. It's still like gigantically too much. So, you know, price is a tricky game in the United States. I know you're dealing with a different scale in this country as they are, but remember, in Norway and a lot of European countries that really took off with biosimilars, they were getting 50 to 70% discounts on their biosimilars in the last few years. And that hasn't changed. But yet you're being offered what here in Dubai?
30 to 40%. Yeah, depends upon which biosimilar you're talking about.
And what choice do you have? I was told today if you work for a government clinic, you got to do what they tell you. If you're in private, you can control the situation. And that's kind of the way it is we're in the United States. If you don't like it, you know what you do? Change to a drug that doesn't have a biosimilar. Change them to abatacept. Change them to tocilizumab, sarilumab, JAK inhibitor. You'll fix their wagon. You'll show them. Now, is that the right thing to do for the patient? Easy to do if the patient's not doing well. Kind of unethical to do if the patient is doing well on infliximab.